Welcome, the Lord's chosen. Some people spend years learning how to survive pressure. Others were just born in it and never realized the world calls that elite training. There's a reason special operations forces spend decades mastering composure, precision, and mental discipline, the kind that turns chaos into choreography. But here's the twist. Some of you have been doing that your entire life without a manual, a mentor, or a medal. While they had obstacle courses and controlled simulations, you had emotional minefields and unpredictable people. They practiced hostage negotiations. You dealt with relatives at family gatherings. Science calls it adaptive conditioning, when the brain rewires itself to survive ongoing stress. But what happens when that conditioning goes too deep? When survival isn't an act, but your entire identity? That's when you stop trying to stay calm under pressure, because you are the pressure. You didn't have tactical instructors yelling focus, life yelled louder. You didn't have rehearsals, you had consequences. And somehow, through all that, you developed instincts sharper than protocol and endurance stronger than routine. You became what entire units trained decades to simulate, without even realizing it. So tonight we're not talking about soldiers or strategy, we're talking about you, the one who mastered what others studied, the one who didn't plan the transformation. It just happened quietly, naturally, like evolution skipping the queue and deciding, yeah, let's just make this one different. Because while the world writes manuals, you lived one, written in scars, silence, and unintentional excellence. Number one, you operate on instinct. They operate on training. There's a difference between learning to act under pressure and living every day inside it. Special forces are taught to stay calm in the storm. You had to learn to be calm because the storm never left. They trained to think clearly when everything goes wrong. You learned clarity the hard way when everything did. That's not theory, that's lived experience. Their instincts were programmed through repetition, drills, commands, and carefully measured doses of fear. Yours were sculpted by real-life uncertainty, by moments where hesitation could cost everything. They practiced reaction time with stopwatches. You built reflex through survival. That's the kind of edge no classroom or commander can replicate. Your body learned to read the air before tension even broke. You can feel a lie before it's spoken, sense a shift in energy before a word is said. It's not magic. It's awareness honed by exposure. You spent years reading danger in faces, tone, and silence. That's more advanced than any tactical training. They were conditioned to follow an order. You were conditioned to trust an inner alarm that never needed external validation. You don't plan your next move. It happens. When things go wrong, your mind doesn't panic. It organizes. You move fast, but not recklessly. Calm doesn't mean you're not affected. It means you've already seen worse. That's what instinct does. It replaces overthinking with precision. And maybe that's what sets you apart. They act because they were told to. You act because you know. They were trained to respond when the mission starts. You've been responding since before you even knew there was a mission. They run simulations to practice pressure. You carry pressure in your bloodstream like oxygen. You didn't gain this through medals, ranks, or motivational quotes. You earned it through exhaustion, heartbreak, disappointment, and still showing up anyway. That's why your instincts work. They're not built on tactics, they're built on truth. So when people wonder how you stay calm, how you always seem to know what to do when everyone else freezes, it's because you've already lived through the kind of chaos they're still rehearsing for. They studied the battlefield. You became it. Number two, your trauma became your tactical intelligence. Pain rewired you in ways you never asked for, but it gave you something few people ever develop, perception that cuts through noise. Every heartbreak, betrayal, and failure turned into quiet training sessions for your intuition. You didn't just survive emotional hits. You studied them without realizing it. Each time someone lied, you memorized the rhythm of deception. Each time you lost something you thought you couldn't live without, you learned what truly can't be taken from you. Those lessons became strategy. While others trained to manage stress, your life turned stress into a teacher. You learned how to read rooms, people, and motives before they revealed themselves. You began to sense danger not through logic, but through feeling. That subtle awareness born from being caught off guard too many times. It's not paranoia. It's data collection, encoded in memory, refined through experience. That's tactical intelligence. Not the kind that comes from textbooks, but from scars that learned how to think. Trauma has a cruel way of forcing growth. It breaks your sense of safety, but it sharpens your ability to detect real threats. You started to see patterns, the same words people use before they walk away, the same energy shifts before betrayal, the same silence before chaos. You didn't become cautious, you became calibrated. That's the quiet superpower that trauma gives. Hyper-awareness turned into foresight. People think strength means not being affected, but real strength is learning from what hurt you instead of becoming it. You turned confusion into clarity. You stopped asking, why me, and started asking, what's this teaching me? That switch is where intelligence begins, because when pain stops being random and starts being educational, you stop repeating lessons and start mastering them. Now, when others panic, you analyze. When they react emotionally, you stay strategic, not because you're cold, but because you've already felt worse and learned to function through it. You think faster under pressure because your nervous system has been there before, too many times to count. Your trauma didn't just break you, it programmed you. It built a mind that doesn't need orders or instructions to navigate chaos. What others call instinct is just you, processing pain as data and turning it into survival wisdom no training can replicate. Number 3, you learned adaptation before you learned safety. Some people grow up learning that the world is safe until proven otherwise. You learned the opposite, that safety was something you had to build, not something that was given. From early on, you were forced to adjust, to read situations quickly, to bend without breaking. While others were learning stability, you were mastering survival through constant change. Adaptation became your first language. You didn't choose it. Life chose it for you. That's why unpredictability doesn't scare you. It's familiar. You've lived through enough shifting circumstances that you stopped waiting for consistency. Instead, you learned how to create your own balance, even when the ground moved. Change doesn't throw you off. It activates you. You move fast. You pivot easily, because your sense of direction isn't based on comfort. It's based on instinct. You can walk into chaos and still find the rhythm. That's not luck. It's training disguised as hardship. You adjusted to emotional climates the way soldiers adjust to terrain. You learned which version of yourself to bring into each situation. Not because you were fake, but because survival demanded versatility. You became fluent in adaptation, knowing when to fight, when to retreat, when to stay silent, when to act. That's emotional intelligence developed under pressure, and it runs deeper than any motivational advice about staying calm. The truth is, stability feels strange to you sometimes because your nervous system got used to motion. You're not addicted to chaos, you're just conditioned to respond. You've lived through too many sudden changes to believe anything lasts forever, so you learned how to last instead. You became your own constant. That's the power of someone who learned adaptation before safety. They don't crumble when things fall apart. They adjust and rebuild faster than anyone expects. You might not realize it, but this kind of adaptability makes you unstoppable. While others are waiting for conditions to improve, you've already shifted your strategy. While they freeze at uncertainty, you see opportunity. Because when change shows up, it doesn't intimidate you. It reminds you who you are. You were never trained to adapt. You were forced to. And that's why you do it better than anyone who ever studied it. Number 4, your emotions are sensors, not weakness. You were taught that showing emotion meant losing control, that strength meant silence. But the truth is, your emotions were never the enemy. They were the alarm system keeping you alive. You don't suppress what you feel, you decode it. Every flicker of anger, every sting of sadness, every sudden unease. Those are not flaws, they're signals. They tell you when something's off, when energy shifts, when someone's words don't match their intentions. You've learned to read emotion the way others read maps. Most people drown in what they feel because they don't understand it. You learn to stay afloat by paying attention. You can tell when something's wrong before anyone says a word, not because you're dramatic, but because you've been there too many times. Pain sharpened your perception. Empathy gave you range. You don't just feel emotions, you analyze them in real time. That's not sensitivity, that's intelligence at work. People who think emotions are weakness usually don't know how to handle their own, but you've learned to turn them into tools. Fear keeps you cautious but not frozen. Anger fuels your boundaries instead of destroying your peace. Sadness slows you down just long enough to process what matters. Every feeling has a function, and you've mastered the language of all of them. You know that numbness isn't power, it's disconnection. You've seen how people who shut off their emotions lose their ability to sense truth. They can't read people, they can't feel timing, they can't anticipate danger. But you can, because your emotional awareness gives you an early warning system that logic alone can't match. You feel things before they become visible, and that gives you the kind of edge that can't be faked. It took years to understand that feeling deeply doesn't make you fragile. It makes you precise. Your emotions don't control you, they inform you. They don't slow you down, they steer you in the right direction. You don't hide them because they're not liabilities, they're your intelligence network. And that's why you stay undefeated. You don't just move through the world, you sense it, down to its smallest vibration, and that awareness keeps you 3 steps ahead of everything trying to catch you off guard. Number 5, they have protocols. You have intuition. There's a difference between preparation and perception. Protocols are built for what's known. Intuition operates in what isn't. They train for specific outcomes, rehearsing every move in a predictable chain of cause and effect. You, on the other hand, don't wait for confirmation. You sense patterns before they take shape. Your instincts aren't guided by a manual. They're guided by something ancient in you, something that's been refined by real experience, not theory. They rely on systems. You rely on signals. When something feels off, you don't need proof to act. Your body already knows. That's not superstition, it's intelligence formed through exposure. While others need data to decide, you've learned that hesitation can be a luxury. You move when something in you says move, because you've seen what happens when you ignore that voice. Your intuition isn't a soft whisper. It's a sharpened radar that's been calibrated by every close call, every wrong turn, every moment your gut screamed before logic caught up. They follow orders to maintain control. You follow instincts to survive it. Protocols can fail when the situation shifts too quickly, but intuition bends and adapts. It reads what can't be measured: tone, timing, energy, silence. Where others get stuck trying to understand, you already feel the outcome forming. That's what separates those who act from those who react. You've probably confused people who live by rules because you move differently. You don't always explain your choices. You just know when it's time to go, to stay, to speak, to disappear. To them, it looks reckless. To you, it's alignment. You're not guessing, you're listening to yourself, to the room, to the subtle shifts that most people overlook. And that's what makes you precise. You don't need perfect conditions or external approval to trust your path. You've learned that your inner compass is more accurate than most people's strategies. It's not arrogance, it's self-awareness earned through trial. You don't need structure to be sharp. You just need to stay connected to that inner signal that's been right more times than any rulebook ever will. They have checklists. You have truth, and truth never needs instructions. Number 6, you weren't trained to endure. You were built to. Some people learn endurance through motivational quotes, gym routines, or weekend challenges. You learned it by surviving seasons that were meant to break you. Endurance wasn't a skill you picked up. It's the core material of your design. You didn't practice pushing through. You simply didn't have the option to stop. Life made you keep walking long after your strength was gone, and somehow you still moved forward. That's not training, that's construction. You were built to last. Resilience for you isn't about bouncing back. It's about refusing to disappear. You've faced moments that rewired your definition of strength. It's not loud, it's not dramatic. It's that quiet persistence that wakes up every morning and keeps going even when nothing makes sense. The kind of endurance you have isn't fueled by hype. It's powered by necessity. You didn't get stronger because you wanted to. You got stronger because weakness was never an option. People like to glorify toughness, but yours isn't glamorous. It's not forged in comfort or controlled environments. It's built from real struggle, from those nights where quitting seemed logical, but surviving felt like duty. You've endured heartbreak, loss, rejection, confusion, and came out not polished, but proven. The world didn't teach you how to handle pressure. It simply handed it to you until it stopped feeling foreign. That's why your kind of endurance hits different. You don't panic when things fall apart. You've already learned how to rebuild yourself from rubble. You don't complain about the weight. You've been carrying heavier things in silence for years. You don't need to hype yourself up to face hard days. You've lived too many of them to be intimidated anymore. You were never trained to endure because training implies preparation. You didn't get time to prepare. You adapted on impact. And every time life hit, it reinforced your foundation instead of cracking it. That's what makes your strength terrifyingly real. You don't fake composure, you embody it. You don't wear endurance like armor. It is your skin. Others learn to survive. You simply do. Because survival isn't your response, it's your nature. Number 7, you don't need permission to execute. Most people wait for approval before they act. They need confirmation, support, or a sign that it's the right time. You don't. You've learned that waiting kills momentum and hesitation dilutes power. When something inside you says move, you move. Not because you're impulsive, but because you trust the signal that comes from within. You've spent too long in situations where waiting meant missing your window, where asking for permission meant losing your purpose. So you stopped asking. You operate from instinct, not instruction. The world runs on systems, hierarchies, protocols, unwritten rules, and they're useful for people who need structure to function. But for you, structure often became a cage. You realized that the more people you consult, the more diluted your vision becomes. Too many opinions slow down execution, and too much waiting turns clarity into confusion. So you trained yourself to move on intuition, not consensus. That's what makes you dangerous in the eyes of those who depend on approval. They can't understand someone who acts without needing validation. You've learned that leadership doesn't always wear a title. Sometimes it's simply the courage to act when no one else will. You've seen people stall their entire lives waiting for green lights that never come. You became your own signal. You don't need applause to begin or assurance to continue. You understand that direction comes from conviction, not confirmation. When your soul gives you the go-ahead, you don't debate it, you execute. And it's not recklessness, it's alignment. You're not driven by ego, you're driven by purpose. There's a rhythm to your movement that others mistake for impatience, but you know what they don't, that energy has timing, and when the moment calls, hesitation kills opportunity. You've learned to trust that pull, that inner order that tells you exactly when to step forward, even when no one else sees the path. That's what unsettles people who live by systems. They need approval to move. You only need awareness. They call it risk. You call it flow. You don't wait to be chosen, you choose. Because you've already learned that real authority doesn't come from permission. It comes from alignment with purpose. And when you move from that place, nothing and no one can stop you. Number 8, your calm isn't discipline. It's damage rewired. People think you're calm because you're centered. They don't realize you're calm because you've been through hell, and your body simply stopped overreacting. That stillness they admire didn't come from meditation or mindset training. It came from surviving situations where fear was constant and escape wasn't an option. You didn't learn calmness in comfort. You learned it in chaos. Panic became so familiar that your mind had to rewire itself just to stay functional. What looks like discipline is really adaptation, a nervous system that learned not to waste energy on what it can't control. You've had moments where everything was falling apart and no one came to fix it. That's when your breathing slowed, not because you were practicing mindfulness, but because your body knew that if it panicked, it would break. You learned composure the hard way, not in workshops or through self-help books, but through repetition of pain. When chaos became your daily environment, calmness became your only defense. That's not peace, that's programming. People misunderstand that. They call you emotionally detached or too composed, as if calmness means you don't care. What they don't see is how your calm isn't the absence of emotion. It's emotion mastered through necessity. You've cried your tears in private, screamed in silence, and still showed up. That rewired something inside you. You learned that emotional explosions don't solve anything. Clarity does. And clarity only comes when you can breathe through the breakdown. This kind of calm is quiet power. It's the kind that unnerves people because it's unpredictable. You don't react, you respond. You don't raise your voice because you've seen that real danger doesn't announce itself loudly. It arrives quietly, like you do now. You've become the person who can stand in the middle of emotional fire and still think clearly. That's not because you're fearless. It's because fear stopped being new a long time ago. So when people mistake your calm for discipline, let them. They don't need to know that every breath you take in chaos is backed by years of conditioning, not from training camps, but from life itself. You didn't learn calmness, you became it. Not by choice, but by survival. And that's why your silence doesn't mean serenity. It means you've already seen worse and decided not to flinch. Number 9, you see patterns. Others call coincidence. You don't believe in random anymore, not because you're cynical, but because you've seen too much to think everything just happens. Life trained your mind to connect dots that most people don't even notice. Where others see chance, you see sequences. Where they see coincidence, you see cause and effect. Pain forced your brain to start recognizing repetition. The tone someone uses before betrayal, the silence that comes before distance, the gut feeling that always proves right. That's not paranoia. That's pattern recognition born from survival. When you've been through enough cycles, your awareness sharpens. You stop taking people's words at face value and start watching their consistency. You notice the smallest shifts, timing, energy, habits, the things most overlook because they're still trusting the surface. You learned that nothing repeats by accident. Every disappointment, every loss, every lesson came dressed in different faces, but carried the same signature. So you started paying attention. That awareness turned into precision. While others dismiss their instincts, you analyze them. You don't ignore discomfort anymore, you study it. If something feels off, you don't rationalize it away, because you've learned that ignoring patterns only leads to pain that could have been avoided. You see meaning in timing, truth in tone, and warning in repetition. That doesn't make you obsessive, it makes you informed. You've built your own mental radar, tuned by experience, sharpened by disappointment, and verified by results. The ability to see patterns is what keeps you steps ahead. You can read situations before they unfold. You can tell when someone's intentions shift before they even realize it themselves. You know when energy starts changing in a room. People might call it coincidence, but it's just awareness they haven't earned yet. Pain trained your perception. Every hardship was a lesson in human behavior. Every betrayal a masterclass in recognizing signs. You don't chase luck because you've learned to anticipate outcomes. You don't rely on fate because you've studied rhythm. You see the loops life runs in, and that allows you to break them. You've turned observation into armor. While others move blind through repetition, you navigate with precision, because to you, nothing is random. Everything leaves a trail, and you've become the kind of person who knows how to read it. Number 10, your strength wasn't built in gyms, it was built in graves. Real strength doesn't come from workouts or pep talks, it comes from burial grounds, the kind where you've had to lay versions of yourself to rest. You've died emotionally more times than you can count, and every time you thought it was over, something inside you clawed its way back. You've buried dreams, relationships, identities, and illusions that once defined you. Each loss stripped you down, and from that emptiness, something harder and clearer emerged. That's why your strength feels different. It's not about muscle, it's about resurrection. Gyms build bodies, but pain builds character. And your kind of strength wasn't shaped by discipline. It was forged through demolition. You've had to rebuild yourself from nothing so often that you stopped fearing endings. Every heartbreak became a blueprint for resilience. Every loss became a lesson in detachment. You stopped begging life to go easy on you because you realized it was never meant to. The breaking was the training. You've buried softer versions of yourself. The ones that believed everyone had good intentions. The ones that waited to be saved. The ones that apologized for existing. They didn't die in vain. They made room for the version of you that doesn't depend on validation, that doesn't break when things fall apart, that knows silence isn't weakness. It's power gathering its focus. Each death taught you something no mentor could, that endings are simply the earth shifting to make space for something more evolved. That's why you move differently now. You're not scared of letting go because you've already mastered loss. You don't panic when things fall apart because you've rebuilt better every time. What others see as coldness is just clarity, a deep understanding that survival requires shedding what can't come with you. You've become surgical with your energy, selective with your peace, and ruthless with your growth. Your strength wasn't sculpted, it was resurrected. It rose out of grief, silence, and disappointment. You've been to your own graves, buried your past selves, and walked out with eyes sharper and a heart steadier. And that's why nothing can intimidate you now, because you've already faced death in every form except physical. You don't lift weights, you lift what you've lived through. And that's a kind of strength no gym can build. Number 11, they mastered scenarios. You mastered reality. Training rooms can teach tactics, but they can't teach truth. You've lived through experiences no simulation could ever recreate. betrayal, heartbreak, loss, humiliation, spiritual warfare. You didn't face theoretical problems, you faced consequences. While others studied how to respond to danger, you had to survive it without guidance, backup, or reset buttons. You didn't run drills, you ran for your life, your sanity, and your soul. That's why your instincts are sharper than any strategy. You learned reality, not rehearsal. They trained for situations that have an ending. You endured ones that didn't. You had to think, feel, and move while bleeding emotionally. You couldn't hit pause to analyze what to do next. You adapted in real time. That kind of conditioning rewires a person. It gives you reflexes that don't just react. They anticipate. You've seen how fast things can change, how good intentions can twist, how silence can be louder than shouting. You don't need warning signs anymore. Your awareness reads them automatically. People who live by scenarios expect predictability. They plan for things to go according to plan. But you've learned that life laughs at plans. It moves in chaos, and you've danced with it enough times to find the rhythm. You don't freeze when things go wrong. You flow. You don't need ideal conditions to win. You adjust mid-crisis because that's how you were built. Reality has been your instructor, and its lessons are written in scars, not textbooks. They memorize what to do under stress. You evolved under it. You learned that survival isn't about strength. It's about awareness, adaptation, and timing. You don't operate off scripts because reality doesn't hand out scripts. It hands out shocks. And somehow, you've learned to turn those shocks into strategy. You've lived through betrayals that taught you how to read people, heartbreaks that taught you patience, and failures that taught you precision. Every experience sharpened your instincts until they became second nature. You don't overthink, you know. You don't guess, you sense. That's the kind of mastery no academy can produce. So while others rehearse how to handle chaos, you just walk through it with quiet confidence, because you don't play scenarios, you survived reality. And reality, in all its brutality, crowned you its graduate long before they finished their training. Number 12, you learned how to stay invisible until it was time to strike. You understood early that being seen too soon attracts the wrong kind of attention. While others chased validation, you learned the power of staying quiet, of keeping your movements private until they became impossible to ignore. You don't hide out of fear, you stay low out of wisdom. You've seen what happens when people broadcast their plans too early. They invite sabotage, jealousy, and distraction. So you mastered invisibility, not as weakness, but as strategy. You don't announce every step you take. You let people think you're inactive, complacent, even irrelevant, until you move, and suddenly everything shifts. That's not manipulation, that's control. You've learned that real power doesn't need to be loud. It needs to be effective. And effectiveness thrives in silence. You let others chase the spotlight while you built in the shadows, quietly sharpening your timing, your awareness, your craft. You know the impact is always louder when no one sees it coming. They camouflage in uniforms, rules, and ranks. You camouflage in patience. You blend into the noise of normal life, unbothered by applause or attention. You've learned to operate beneath perception, not to disappear, but to develop. Because you understand something most don't. Visibility before readiness is vulnerability. And you've had enough experience with betrayal, envy, and imitation to know that not everyone clapping for you wants you to win. That's why your silence isn't emptiness, it's preparation. You don't speak to prove, you act to confirm. When you do move, it's surgical. No wasted energy, no warning, no explanation. People only realize what you were building once the results appear, and by then, it's too late to interfere. You've already executed. This way of operating unsettles people who crave validation. They can't understand how you function without noise, how you maintain composure without attention. But that's your edge. You're not addicted to being seen. You're addicted to being effective. You don't fight for space, you create it. You've learned that shadows are not your prison, they're your training ground. So when you strike, it's never expected. It's precise, unstoppable, and irreversible. Because you never wasted energy announcing your rise. You spent it preparing for it. By the time they realize where you've been, you're already 10 steps ahead, standing in a position they never saw you build. Number 13, you don't fear chaos. You speak its language. Most people panic when things start falling apart. You don't. Chaos doesn't confuse you, it calms you. Not because you enjoy it, but because you've lived in it long enough to understand its rhythm. Where others see noise, you see patterns. What overwhelms them gives you focus. You've spent so much time in unpredictable situations that disorder became your environment, not your enemy. That's why you move smoothly through what others stumble over. You've been decoding storms your entire life. You learned that chaos isn't random, it's revealing. It strips away illusions and exposes what's real, who's solid, who's scared, who's sincere. You stopped running from it once you realized it's where truth hides. While others wait for calm to think clearly, your clarity activates when everything's collapsing. You process faster, act smarter, and adapt cleaner because chaos trained you to operate without guarantees. That's not recklessness, that's mastery under pressure. You've faced situations that didn't come with instructions. You had to build logic from madness, structure from confusion, and peace from panic. You learned that stillness isn't the absence of chaos, it's control within it. You know how to center yourself while everything spins, because chaos taught you emotional balance better than peace ever could. It taught you that sometimes the storm isn't meant to destroy you. It's meant to sharpen your instincts and strip you of what slows you down. People who fear chaos try to avoid it. You walk straight into it when necessary because you understand that change, growth, and transformation never happen in order. You don't crave control, you crave clarity, and chaos gives you both, just in its own violent way. You've learned to find direction through disorder, to use pressure as a guide instead of a threat. That's why people misread you. They think you thrive on conflict or drama, but you don't. You just don't crumble when it arrives. You don't wait for calm seas to steer. You navigate the waves while they're crashing. You've turned chaos into your dialect, fluent in crisis, fluent in composure. And that's why when others break down, you break through. Because what they call turmoil, you simply call Tuesday. Number 14, you became the weapon you were trying to survive. There was a time you waited for someone to show up, someone to defend you, guide you, or at least understand what you were fighting through. But help never came the way you needed it to. So you did what survivors do. You adapted, you hardened, you evolved, you stopped waiting for protection and became your own defense system. Life didn't give you armor, it gave you reasons to build it. Every betrayal became a forge, every loss a hammer, every disappointment a sharpening stone. You didn't ask to become strong, you were cornered into it, and that's what makes your strength different. It wasn't built in peace, it was engineered under threat. You learned to read people like battle maps, to anticipate danger before it arrived, to prepare for the worst without losing your sense of purpose. You stopped crying for rescue because you realized the cavalry wasn't coming. You were the cavalry. You became what you needed to survive. But this transformation came with a cost. You lost the softness that once made you open. You stopped giving people the benefit of the doubt because the wrong ones turned kindness into access. You became sharp, not to wound, but to ward off anything that smelled like harm. Somewhere along the way, survival became your second nature, and gentleness became a luxury you couldn't afford. Yet within that, there's power, because every scar on you is proof that you were once targeted and still couldn't be taken down. Now you move differently, you don't flinch easily, and you don't rely on backup. You carry yourself with a quiet authority that unnerves people who mistake stillness for weakness. They can't understand that your silence isn't submission, it's calculation. You've learned that you don't need to roar when your presence already says, "Don't test me." You are the weapon that life accidentally created, not the kind that destroys, but the kind that defends without hesitation, that endures without apology. You no longer seek safety in others, you are safety for yourself. Everything you went through wasn't meant to break you, it was meant to forge you. And now, you're not just surviving the battlefield, you've become the storm that ends it. All of this comes together to reveal a truth that most will never understand. What you call survival, the world calls mastery. While others spend decades in classrooms, simulations, and controlled exercises, you've been trained by reality itself. Every heartbreak, betrayal, failure, and storm you endured wasn't a setback. It was a lesson in precision, awareness, and resilience. You didn't need manuals, coaches, or mentors. Life's harshest moments shaped you into someone who can move through chaos with calm, read patterns in what seems random, trust instincts over instruction, and act decisively without permission or applause. You've become a living paradox, quiet yet formidable, calm yet explosive, unseen yet unavoidable. Your instincts aren't just reactions, they're evolved strategies. Your endurance isn't just persistence, it's the architecture of your very being. Your emotions aren't weaknesses, they're sensors, guiding you, alerting you, giving you clarity when others are blind. You didn't merely survive. You transformed into the weapon you once wished existed to protect you, a force honed by necessity, sharpened by experience and tempered by adversity. Every step you took, every hardship you endured, every version of yourself you left behind, all contributed to a singular truth. You weren't just living life, you were mastering it. And mastery doesn't come from repetition, drills, or rehearsals. It comes from reality, raw, unfiltered, relentless reality. And you've lived it better than anyone ever could in theory. The lessons others spend years learning in controlled environments, you learned without permission, without preparation, and without guarantee of success. And yet here you are, more precise, more aware, and more capable than most will ever be. This is why your presence is felt, even when silent, why your actions leave ripples long after they're done, and why your instincts outpace what others call training. You are the embodiment of unintentional excellence, the product of life's harshest trials, transformed into mastery that no academy could ever replicate. If this message resonated with you, if you feel that spark of recognition deep within, don't forget to join our journey. Subscribe to the channel for more powerful insights. Like this video to amplify its impact. Comment to share your experience and perspective, and share it with someone who needs to hear this today. Your story, your mastery, and your resilience are part of something greater. And together we rise stronger, sharper, and unstoppable. Stay blessed always.